thanks for coming and coming to this interview. And I understand you have some exciting news and some things to report. So why don't you tell me a little bit, tell our viewers a little bit about what's going on.
I am very, very excited to discuss with you our new PGS system that we're going to be implementing in the 2012-2013 school year to measure student performance and teacher effectiveness.
So how will this work? Tell me a little bit about it.
Well, basically how it works is what we have always done in the past is we've always measured teachers based on observational data. And we've never really taken into account the student performance end of it. And one of the positives I see in implementing what we refer to as Standard 7, which is using the student data to measure teacher effectiveness, is it's really going to help measure for the first time, I feel, a student's growth. Whereas the system that we have in place currently only measures student performance once every year, and there's nothing to really compare their growth from the beginning of a year to the end of the school year. So it's really going to kind of be exciting in that vein, in that for the first time ever, we're going to be able to see gains in student learning across time. One of the drawbacks that I could possibly see would be that some of the students won't be getting the type of data reported out because they are measured on alternative standards. In the state of Virginia, we have two sets of standards which students are measured on. We have the standards of learning, the SOLs, and then we have the aligned standards of learning, which is the track for students who are most profound and severe disabilities, who will be participating in a special type of diploma program, most likely a special ed program or a modified standard. Those students would not, because they participate in an alternative assessment, which is a portfolio assessment, rather than taking the SOL test like their other peers, they would not be getting one of these scores, which is referred to as a student growth percentile or an SGP. You know, in the education field, we love to talk in acronyms, and I think it's really important that we try to minimize that and identify them as much as possible as we're going through this process.
So what is this student growth percentile? What exactly is that, and how will that number be arrived at?
Well, the way that I would explain it is that it is basically when we're born, we get an APGAR score. And when we go to the doctors to get our checkups, we get a growth percentile score that is basically a norm reference score ranging from 0 to 100, and we're nationally normed and compared with other babies to see where we fall in that lineup for growth and development. And it's kind of the same principle that's being applied to these scores for the Standards of Learning test, in that they're going to be a percentile score and they're going to norm them, but the comparison is going to be to other students across the state of Virginia. So for the first time, we're going to be taking these scores that are earned on an SOL test and taking them and lining them up across the state of Virginia to give a comparison data to where our students fall into a category.
So they might take, say, like on a third grade science SOL, then the students take that test and they're kind of normed against every other third grader who's taken that test.
That's absolutely what it would be.
And it would be based on their scores. If you receive a 400, which is obviously the passing score, you would
Absolutely.
see where everybody falls.
Absolutely.
And then how does that, so that translates now into then evaluating teachers.
Yes, it does. A part of it, a portion. And really what we're looking at now is more of a comprehensive model where we're talking about evaluating our teachers. And I think that it can be very positive in the way that you've implemented, and the fact that now teachers are going to have more control over being able to show you what they're doing in their classrooms. In the past, traditionally, they may have gotten an observation once a year, and maybe that was the worst day that they've ever had in their entire life. They got up in the morning, they had a bad hair day, who knows, you know? And is it really fair for one snapshot in time, especially if you were having your worst of days, for an evaluator to come in and to give you your feedback based on that one evaluation? Whereas now it's going to be more comprehensive. There's a portfolio component to it. where teachers will collect proof, in essence, to create a portfolio to show how they're working towards a SMART goal. And the SMART goal is basically an acronym, and it stands for a goal that is specific in nature, it's measurable, it's attainable and appropriate, it is rational, and it's time-bound. So when you look at those and you create the goal at the beginning of the year, you would go through the goal-setting process with a teacher. And obviously, the teacher would be encouraged to choose something or select an area where they'd want to grow in, or they'd be able to show some type of growth. And then after they've selected their SMART goal and created that with the administrative team, then they would work towards that portfolio piece and component to be able to find that data points. So that when we get together, and we will do observations would be a piece of it still, but it would be more than just one large observation. It would be informal observations over time so that you really get a sense of what this teacher's capabilities are and how that's going to impact their students. And then of course there is the component with the student achievement data that would be generated from the SGPs, which would come into, I think it's 20% of the students' the teacher's performance overall.
I was looking at that on the website, and one of the things that really frankly surprised me is that there's no place where teachers are evaluated for their morality. I know, for example, that, in some of the schools, there are teachers who are openly having affairs with each other to the point where students know about it. I don't want people like that teaching my children. Why isn't something like that part of the evaluation process?
Right, and I think that is in ours. If you take a look at our professional growth model, you'll see there's a piece of professionalism, and moral ethics is a piece of that. And I believe that falls under the moral turpitude piece. So if you take a look at it, I do think that's taken into account. I think you're limited in what you can do when it's outside of workspace, and I also think you have to know that it's happening to be able to make a judgment and say whether that's impacting student learning or it's impacting something within your school building. Just like with student discipline, we have to be very careful, with how we intervene in the lives of teachers. But I do think there's a huge coaching component that's involved with our PGS system, and I think it's based on trust. It has to be. If you don't have trust, you're not going to be able to effectively pull this off.
Mm-hmm.
So I do think that's a huge piece of it, and that's a relationship building piece, and that's part of my job as the administrator in that building for the county.
So it sounds like there would be some checks and balances, and that those kinds of things would be considered in the big picture in terms of the teacher evaluation.
I do believe so.
What do teachers think about this new system?
Well, I think you're always going to have your opponents and you're going to have your proponents. I think one of the things that teachers are really excited about in my division is the fact that for the first time ever, you're going to be able to measure student growth over time, because in the past, as I stated earlier, we give one test at the end of the year and on an annual basis, and then the students either pass and go on to the next year, take another test, which necessarily isn't linked to the same standards. And so you've never really had a comparison or growth over time model. Now, for the first time, we're going to be able to see a student's growth over time, so that relates to their teaching over time. And I think it's going to impact the way that we work together in our vertical articulation and also our curriculum efforts. I think we're going to have to get really strong in those areas and have those open conversations that are compelling to talk about what were you doing with this student in years prior, and how can I help build on that to take student A from point B to point C and beyond. I think some of the downfalls of it are obviously the piece about the SMART goals. If you don't have someone who is necessarily skilled in the area of creating a SMART goal, that's obviously going to be a hurdle. You're going to have to do a huge piece of professional development, which we are accounting for, because if you've never done it before, then how do you know? So we will be doing a large training for veterans and for novice teachers to help them develop in their professional learning and to help them really take control of developing those SMART goals. We have provided examples broken down by content area to give teachers an idea of what a SMART goal would look like in their specific content area, so that they can have a model to use, especially for the first year with us going into this. We've also provided sample data points that they could collect. We've shown them sample portfolios that have been turned in other states for teachers, so they have an idea of what it is that we're looking for when we talk about Standard 7.
And this is for every teacher?
It is for well, yes, it is for every teacher. For the students in grades 4 through 8 and in Algebra 1 only right now, they will receive the SGP scores based on their SOL test, and that will make up 20% of the professional growth for that teacher's effectiveness. And also they would have another 20%, which would be in that development of that SMART goal, so that would equal to 40% of that standard. Now, for teachers that are teaching other areas, they're working very hard right now at the state and local level to come up with a classification system to be able to put teachers in tiers so that they can work on the SMART goal piece, but it's going to account for 40% of their growth because there is no score in that area to give for those teachers. Mm-hmm. It's not a perfect system by any means, and we fully expect some pushback, but I think we'll work through it. I think overall it's very positive for our students. It's very positive for our teachers, and I think we just have to, like with anything else, dip our toe in and move slow.
Well, it sounds very exciting. Look forward to see how this plays out in the future. Hopefully it'll be successful.
Yep. Thanks.
Thank you.